Mic check, mic check. Levels look good, I think. Maybe. Probably a little quiet. But hopefully at this distance, it won't pick up so much of my breathing. Alright. We're gonna slow this song down. Because it wouldn't be an Alchemancer stream if we don't play... Especially right here for the final confrontation. Welcome! Hope your fence cleanup issue went okay. I can imagine, yeah. Probably made of like really thin particle board that just kind of got a coat of paint. Oh, nice. That's what you want with fences. Look at Naira. Oh. I'm not gonna say she'll be the star of the show tonight, but there's so many people that this song fits for this part of the story. It's just everyone is responding to Bradburn being the way he is. Alright. I had a realization and a thought. I don't actually want to switch the image perspective all that much during the thing tonight. What I'm gonna try to do... Let me double check and see if I have the art I think I have. I don't know how it comes through, but I am jamming out to this song because it's so much fun. This will be fine, probably. I'm gonna hide Naira. To be quite honest, I probably should have done this. Whoop. I'm just gonna plop that there-ish. Probably should have done this a while ago, but oh well. Looks roughly centered-ish, maybe. Oh. Grab something I didn't mean to grab. Whatever it was. Whatever it was, it got moved. I don't think that cuts off chat. Aha! Perfect. It's the cover for book 2. AKA the book we're reading. Oh man. Where to even begin? Last time. Where did we pick up last time? I think we picked up last time with Rolf and Bradburn attacking. Well, that's confusing. We picked up with Rolf's perspective as Bradburn was attacking the remaining ministers and successfully breaking through. There was a bit of a fight, and in the scuffle, poor Rolf went down, electrocuted by his own Electrum pack. We caught up with Naira, Moira, confusing my own characters. Caught up with Moira, who asked Tigra to help launch her into the sky so that they could try to plug the giant hole in the top of the dome that protects the city that Tazael had just punched in it. Because Tazael broke a giant hole, so now all of the air of the planet is just streaming into the city, and he's convinced this is going to help everyone see that Nulfs in particular aren't what people think they are. Hello. That's not the name. Do I need to mod a second time? So from there, she flew up, used the Tarum that Tazael had set aside for this event to plug up the hole with vines as at least some manner of a kind of stopgap. On the way back down, they were struck by lightning and crashed back into the stadium. From there, we jumped over to Renetta's perspective and got to watch Bradburn execute more of the ministers and their aides as he sought somebody to give him political support so that people within the city of Cyphus would accept his rise to power and his step into the position of Grand Dictator or whatever he will end up being, as he enacts his plan to kick Nulfs from the bulb forever. There was a fight because she wasn't going to go down without swinging, and Tazael showed up, eager for revenge, eager to make Bradburn pay. Eventually, Moira joined him, and they fought him together, and Renetta tried to help, and unfortunately got shot by Bradburn. Moira panicked, ran to her mom. Her mom is dying on the ground. Leo showed up too late, stopped Bradburn from doing anything to Moira, and grabbed Bradburn's attention. Naira also showed up at the last moment and slipped a dark violet crystal to Moira, telling her to combine the crystal song with her mother's and to sing with everything she had left. So, that's where we're picking up. You guys ready? It all comes down to this. Chapter 69. Mother. Standing back up, Naira spun to face the most wicked man in Cyphus. It was time for all of this to end. Water sprayed in all directions as Leo Parsons and Walter Bradburn traded blows. Both clearly had years of experience, throwing heavy punches and slicing with claws, but Leo was fighting with a handicap. His gun was still clutched in one hand, and he was doing everything he could to keep Bradburn from taking it. Well, Naira wasn't going to let him fight alone. She likely only had a few minutes of prism left in her tank, and her supply had been reduced to a single electrum battery. She'd spent half of that battery fighting her way outside. It would have to do. Renetta's song echoed through the stadium in a faltering hum. Moira probably couldn't form words right now, even if she wanted to. The song itself wasn't what Naira had expected, but neither was it surprising. There was a stately march to it, a consistent drive that was unsatisfied with anything except forward movement. It was the backdrop they all deserved as Naira joined the fray. From her position as an external observer, several things became rapidly clear. First, the blood soaking the fur around Bradburn's ears hadn't fully washed out in the rain, and there was an almost lurching quality to the large man's steps. He'd sustained some kind of head injury that was affecting his balance, and it showed in how much he was holding back his blows so as not to overextend himself. Naira could use that. Second, the prismatic glow to Bradburn's eyes was fading in two ways. As with normal usage, it was diminishing in intensity. But just like Elaine and Paddock, it was also diminishing in definition. The irises were clouding over under the glow, and Bradburn's attacks were growing more aggressive. Third, Leo seemed to recognize this, as he was going above and beyond to avoid inflicting any serious wounds. Indeed, the detective was largely on the defensive, probably waiting for a good opportunity to land some kind of incapacitating blow. It was costing him, though, as evidenced by blood leaking through the shredded sections of his vest and shirt. Once they committed to damaging Bradburn past the point of no return, they had to be willing to end the fight for good. Rolling her neck and her shoulders, Naira gave her head a quick shake, then threw herself at Bradburn. She started low to the ground, and her momentum made Bradburn stagger to the side as she'd hoped. Once he was clear of Leo, she unleashed a jolt of electrum. After a couple seconds, she felt something else trying to influence her electrum. Shutting off the reaction, she planted an uppercut into Bradburn's chin and leapt backwards as his claws swept out in retaliation. "Go time, then," Leo said. "Sorry, but not that sorry, Bradburn. You'll heal." Raising his gun, he fired 8 rounds into Bradburn's knee before discarding the empty pistol. Well, that was certainly one way to make sure Bradburn couldn't turn Leo's gun against them. Bradburn let out a howl of frustration, but not of pain, as his leg gave out. No sooner had he scrambled onto his good knee than Naira was there with another jolt of electrum. This time, she cut off the reaction early so he couldn't interfere with her casting, and followed up by socking him across the jaw. The irises of his eyes were nearly invisible, and the dull First one of the night. The irises of his eyes were nearly invisible amid the dull glow. His breathing was rapid and furious. Most of the bullet wounds in his leg closed up, but several remained, continuing to leak blood for the rain to wash away. He stared up at them like a cornered deerhound as they both circled, Naira to his front, Leo behind. Leo produced a pair of handcuffs and cautiously approached. Naira prepared herself to deliver another jolt of electrum to the man who had tried to take everything she held dear, when Renetta's song cut off abruptly and Moira let out a yelp. Renetta Dolahan's senses flared to life. She was in pain, serious pain, and while part of her knew that, the rest of her didn't care. What she did care about was that she was dying. It wasn't a conscious thought, more an instinctual understanding. She felt the rain pelting her face like hundreds of icy needles trying to shock her awake. When had the rain stopped being warm? The air around her vibrated with cacophony, like several bands competing for her attention by each trying to play their song louder than the others. The loudest song of all was the sweetest. She heard it with every breath she exhaled, but it hummed far louder than that, just beyond her reach. She tasted life. She could smell it in the air, and it danced hand in hand with raindrops on her tongue. Why couldn't she see? Harsh, blinding light filled her vision, which blurred like she'd gone cross-eyed. Try as she might, Renetta couldn't focus on anything. She could barely make out shapes in the light. Despite not seeing the people around her, she could hear them. She could smell them. She could taste them. Life hung just outside her reach. It hovered over her, taunting her with her own song. She needed it to live, needed it to breathe. The more she smelled that life, the more she gasped for breath she hadn't realized she was missing. It was like trying to breathe around a mouthful of water. If she could only break to the surface, she could breathe in as much as she wanted. She tasted it so close. Her hands shot out through the blinding light, taking that source of life in both hands and drawing its breath to her. Her mouth exploded with life. She would not die today. Fire erupted in Moira's neck as her own mother drank her prism and her blood. Renetta's claws dug deeply into Moira's skin, holding her with a frightening strength she'd never suspected her mother had. Moira's singing had been cut off, and she couldn't tell if Naira's crystal had made things better or worse. Tears rolled down her cheeks inside her mask. Tears of sorrow, tears of pain, tears of terror. Her own mother, forced into one of two options: become an anima spawn or die. "Mom, It's me, she forced out, fighting for every gasp of air she could manage. Her words fell on deaf ears. Her mother continued to drain her. Time to go back to basics. What did Moira have to work with? Curum in her backpack and Tarum in her veins. Her internal prism was being drained faster than she could replenish it. She couldn't take deep enough breaths to keep up. She couldn't hear the songs. On the roof, she hadn't needed to hear them. She'd only needed to sing. Praying for something similar, Moira Dullahan sang to her mother. It was unsteady, and she had to start over several times from being choked during specific notes. Then the blood dripping around her mother's fangs, Moira's own blood, began to glow a soft green. Please, Mom, she whispered. Come back to me. Renetta's body flooded with warmth. Finally, she could breathe again. Life filled her lungs and drove back the cold needling of the rain. The pain in her body was lessening. Again, it was odd to know that she was in pain, but to be completely unbothered by it. There was great comfort in knowing that her body was healing as the pain went away. She didn't want to die. She needed to live, to be there for Cyphus, to be there for her daughter. That meant she needed strength. The longer she drank in that life, the stronger she felt. The cacophony was turning into more of a symphony. The sounds were losing their discordant nature and beginning to blend pleasantly together. Her vision, while still painfully bright, was starting to focus. Something dark filled her field of view. Something warm. A quiet voice hid amongst the symphony. A lone singer almost drowned out by the accompanying instruments and harmonies. Yet it carried a melody so familiar, so enticing, that Renetta strained to hear it above the rest. Rest now, my dearest child. Mother's here beside you. The voice was tremulous, shaking with emotion that cut into Renetta like a knife. She knew that voice, loved that voice. How many years had she stood beside the crib, rocking Moira to sleep with that song? Though nights of fright and fears run wild, I'll keep you safe the whole night through. How many times had her ears perked up in the night because she heard Moira crying? How often she had held her, assured her the nightmare was over, and that everything was okay because her mother was there. How often she'd sung until her precious, sniffling daughter sank into the pillow and drifted back to sleep. So I'll hold you when the nights are cold, hold you tightly like no other. The last time she'd sung that song was the week her husband died. Moira's quiet sobs had awakened her. Renetta had sung it quietly through the adjacent wall, both for herself and for her daughter. She hadn't gone into Moira's room because the girl had already started locking her door. Choosing to respect her daughter's privacy, she'd sung through the wall. Seed mother, what a fool she'd been. How she wished she'd held her daughter then. Moira's trembling voice reached the final line. Because no matter when you're young or old, I'll always be your loving mother. Renetta's mouth was overflowing with liquid life. She'd spent so long drinking it in, breathing through her nose and embracing the warmth, that she choked when she tried to join the song. When she swallowed, the taste was far more bitter than she expected, and though the pain was almost entirely gone, part of her still felt sick. She released the source of life, a fuzzy, person-shaped blob in her sharpening vision. Taking a gasp of crisp, humid air, she echoed the last phrase in a whisper. I'll always be your loving mother. The lights in her vision faded to manageable levels as her daughter came into focus. Get off her! Naira shouted, gripping Renetta by the shoulder and yanking her away. Flinging the woman into the mud, she planted a knee into Renetta's shoulder while bracing an arm under her chin to prevent further biting. Naira glanced back at a stunned and crying Moira. You okay? The girl's hand came up to her bleeding neck, clamping down and applying curum. She gave a small nod. I'll be fine. I'm fine too. Thanks for asking, love, came a croaky voice beneath her. Naira turned back, her gaze meeting one that was unexpectedly lucid. Renetta's eyes still glowed with prism she'd just leached from her own daughter, but the definition had fully returned. Naira slid off, helping Renetta into a sitting position. Sorry. You'd asked me to protect her, so I assumed that meant even from you. Renetta gave a wry smile that went pained as she looked at her daughter. No apology required, love. I'm the one that owes an apology. Moira, I'm so sorry. I don't know what... Lifting a hand, Moira cut her mother off. Save it for later, Mom. I'll be fine. Without a thought for the mud and the mess, Renetta crawled to her daughter. Wrapping her in such a tight embrace, the girl looked like her mask was going to pop off. Well, that was one emergency dealt with. As for the other... Leo grunted as Bradburn threw him into the soggy ground. So much for getting those handcuffs on. Leaving the Dullahans to their moment, Naira sprinted for Bradburn. Current police chief and former police chief rolled around in the mud with a series of hisses and grunts. Before Naira could reach them, Bradburn maneuvered Leo into a chokehold. The monster stared at her with dulling, defiant eyes. His voice was guttural when he spoke, and measured, like it took great concentration to form the words. You know, this is the Mueller who killed your son, right? Oh yes, Naira knew. Because of Leo's actions, she would never get to proofread Ren's Nolfin rights pamphlets again. She would never again get to cheer from the sidelines of the public park when Ren struck a home run. She would never again be able to comfort Ren with an extended hug after a terrible experience at the store or at school. The longer she kept his things around the house, the more his scent faded to be replaced by others. Why defend him? Bradburn asked, squeezing Leo's throat with an arm as large as his entire head. Leo dug in his claws, carving red streaks, but found no relief from the pressure. If I kill him, we both win. Naira missed her son more than someone like Bradburn could ever understand. Yet, she'd come to peace with everything that had followed the death of her son. All her son had longed for was a world where Sneppards and Nolfs could work hand in hand to solve their problems. Bradburn assumed that she would seek peace through petty revenge, because that was all he knew. The moment something becomes a problem, or an inconvenience, you kill it and stomp it out. That was the Bradburn way. Well, it wasn't the Naira way. Yes, she'd lost her son, but she'd gained friends willing to fight for a better future, and that was not something she'd let Bradburn take away from her. He'd never take something away from her again. Bradburn's attempts to distract her didn't even break her stride. With a scowl of frustration, he cast Leo aside. In the next moment, Naira's electrified fist collided with the giant's face. Salatra wasn't in the mood for words, so the series of electrum bursts and jabs that followed expressed her inner desires far better than mere words. Her battery was nearly spent. Again, Leo got to his feet, shook himself off, and sought opportunity to clap Bradburn in handcuffs. By now, Bradburn's eyes had gone fully feral. No more words crawled out of his throat. No more attempts to slime talk his way into getting what he wanted. Just growls and murder. Naira gritted her teeth and let the electrum flow. It surged through Bradburn's body. His balance issues hadn't healed because the convulsions dropped him awkwardly onto an elbow. Naira could feel something pressing against her electrum, trying to dissolve or even just divert it. No. Her will was stronger. She continued the surge until the battery finally drained. Bradburn twitched, his fur standing on end from the top of his singed ears to the tip of his tail. Only once the crackling blue electricity visibly disappeared did Leo step forward to slap his former boss in handcuffs. There was no resistance as the first handcuff clicked shut. It was over. Before Leo could shut the other handcuff, Bradburn burst into motion, raking claws through Leo's torso with such force that Leo was thrown several feet back. The police chief gasped, stumbling to keep his balance, clutching at his stomach with both hands as blood ran past his fingers. "Get to Moira!" Naira called. Leo shot her a pained expression. He obviously didn't want to leave her to fight this off alone. It was also obvious he knew when he wasn't in good enough shape to keep going. With a nod, he retreated. Bradburn slipped in the mud more than once as he struggled to his feet. The knee that Leo had filled with bullets was bleeding again, and it refused to support Bradburn's weight. Even so, he pulled himself along with his enormous arms and his one good leg to chase after Leo. Persistent son of Anima herself. Running after him, Naira did the first thing she could think of to steal his attention. She stomped on his tail, grinding it beneath her booted foot and making a figure eight in the mud. It worked a little too well. She barely had time to leap back as the monster of a man wheeled and swiped at her with bloody claws. Naira was tiring, and her reactions were not what they should have been, even on Prism. The claws caught her arm, leaving a streak of red from elbow to wrist. The fact that Bradburn had drawn blood seemed to energize him, and he swung out again. Naira leapt backwards over and over, those claws taking bits of her clothing, fur, and even skin with every swipe. Eventually, her foot slipped, and she landed hard on her rump. Bradburn let out something like a roar, good leg tensing as he readied himself to pounce. Blessedly, he wouldn't get the chance, as a woman in a completely ruined business suit came running up to smash the butt of a rifle into his face. Gripping the barrel in both hands, Renetta Dolahan wielded the gun like a bat, eyes blazing with prism as she let out a snarl of her own. Unable to stop her spreading smile of disbelief, Naira rolled over and stood back up on exhausted legs. Naira wasn't out of friends in this fight yet. Water. Water is good for you. The perceptive of you in the audience may notice. The title of this chapter might be a little familiar. It's okay. I have something of a gift for names. I realize this. It's the book. That's the name of the thing. He said the thing. I can't remember if I've said this on stream yet or not. For part 7 specifically, I was writing the section around the time that Sanderson put out Tress of the Emerald Sea, and I really, really enjoyed how every chapter was named after a person that showed up in that chapter. Every time. It was always a descriptor of someone in that chapter, and I really appreciated that. So when I came to part 7 and was building my big climax, I did the same thing, where every chapter title has to do with the focus of that chapter. And it's super late to be saying that with chapter 70 Alchemancer, but if you ever go back and look at the chapters, that's why last one was Mother, because Naira and Renetta were the main focus. The one before was Children of Cyphus, because Tazael, Leo, and Moira were all there fighting against Bradburn, etc., so on and so forth. Alright, enough delay. Chapter 70, Alchemancer. No, really, that's okay. Take your time. I'll just use my fingers to hold all my blood inside while I wait. Leo winced. Even making that much of a quip had hurt. Excuse me. Too much water. He could barely take a breath without his midsection flaring in pain. And the girl who had the expertise and materials to heal him was ignoring him to crawl around in the mud. If you can stand around being sarcastic, then you're clearly not dying. I'll help you in a second. I just need to find something first. Leo let out a slow, painful exhale. Lightning overhead flashed the world in white as Moira continued to look for something on the ground. A faint, green glow emanated from her palm, and she crouched low to the ground, sweeping it back and forth like her hand was a metal detector. Leo grimaced. Tell me what you're looking for, and maybe I can help you find it. A gun. There's like 15 dead people out here who all had guns, and their bodies are in the opposite direction of your search. I don't want their guns, Moira said, reaching down to run her fingers through a suspicious lump of mud. It revealed no hidden treasures to her. I want Bradburn's gun. That thing's high enough caliber, even I'm afraid it would snap my wrist if I fired it. No, the other one. A weird one? She nodded, eyes darting to and fro, as another flash of lightning gave her a brief glimpse of her surroundings. With a sigh, Leo took a couple steps forward. His fingers were wet and dripping, and he couldn't feel a difference between the rain and his blood. I think he dropped it over here when I shot him. Moira nodded, her ears flicking against the rain as she continued scanning the ground. Some distance behind them, an animalistic roar was met by the defiant cries of two angry mothers. They definitely had time to be playing needle in a haystack. He was about to say as much when Moira pounced on something gleaming in the mud. Brushing off the object, she held it over her head like she just found the prized pumpkin of the whole patch. Without warning, she thrust the gun into Leo's chest. He stumbled backwards, awkwardly reaching up to take the gun she was forcing upon him. What do you want me to do with this? Shoot Bradburn, obviously, she said, acting like she'd clearly communicated that beforehand. I'll patch you up while you do. True to her word, Leo felt the now familiar warmth of Curum as she rested a hand on his waist. Bradburn's one of those super healy monsters now, he noted. What's a gun gonna do to him? Moira sighed, and he probably only heard it because her mouthpiece was still active. Bradburn shot Tazale with it earlier, and it drained him of his prism. If we drain Bradburn of his prism, he can't continue to rage out and heal up and do other monster stuff. Oh, Leo said, wincing as he attempted to sight down the gun with one arm. His face was swollen, and one eye was rather blurry after all the fighting of the past few minutes. Worse, Renetta and Naira were doing an excellent job of running in to smack Bradburn around, but in so doing, they were blocking Leo's shot. Why didn't you just lead with that explanation? Because it's so much faster just to say, shoot Bradburn. Now, are you going to keep asking stupid questions, or are you going to do the snop thing and shoot the bad guy? First of all, shooting the bad guy should be a snop's last resort, and... Why are you arguing right now, dude? Because... Leo trailed off, his arm trembling. Because I'm sick of shooting people. Then let me make it real easy for you, my friend, Moira said, pausing her song for a moment and pointing at the nearby melee. If you don't shoot that guy, he's going to kill our mothers. Leo frowned. Neither of them is my mother. Have you been living under a rock? Naira's practically the group den mother. Squinting to see out of his better eye, Leo set to lining up his shot. I mean, she's really more of a co-worker. Not even a friend? Moira flicked him in the side, causing him to gasp and reset his aim. Seed Mother, I didn't realize you were that much of a social disaster. He scowled at her. You want me to shoot, or do you want to keep berating me during an already stressful situation? She shrugged, starting into her song again. If you don't shoot him by the time I'm done patching you up, then I'll shoot him. I can shoot. This is an emergency, so I can shoot. Great, dude. Can't wait to see it happen. Seed Mother. She was a worse nag than Melissa during their angry at each other years. His breath left him in a hiss, one that almost fogged in the humid air. He sighted down the gun, waiting for a clear shot. Finally, the opportunity came, and he pulled the trigger. At least, he tried. The trigger stopped part way. That nervous? Moira asked. Leo frowned, looking down at the gun. It won't fire. Then he saw why. It was made of a different kind of metal than steel. The frame of this gun was something much more pliant. When he'd shot the gun into Bradburn's hand, the bullet had lodged in the firing mechanism, denting in part of the much softer metal. It better fire if we're going to stop Bradburn. Yeah, give me a second, Leo said, scraping and tugging at the bullet with his claws. They slid off the slick metal surface, not finding enough purchase to pull it free. Don't suppose you brought a set of pliers or anything? He asked. Why would I have bought pliers? Why would I have brought pliers? Figured it didn't hurt to ask. Firing mechanism's jammed, and I'm not sure how I'm going to break this thing loose. We're Alchemancers, dude. Improvise. Use Tarum or something to wiggle it loose. His thumb scraped the surface of the gun as he tried and failed again to remove the problematic chunk of metal. I ran out of alchemantic stuff back inside. Besides, I don't think Tarum would get under this. I'd need something else. Aquam? No. Good, because I don't have any. Leo blinked and looked at her. Then why even offer? Rolling her eyes, she fixed him with a look of annoyance. Don't get mad at me. I'm trying to help you brainstorm. She pushed a little too hard on his waist, and more blood ran around his fingers. Ow, he said in a hiss. Careful where you... He trailed off, watching the rain wash the red out of his fur. Blood from his fingers was seeping into the crevices of the gun. Oh, brack me, he muttered, realizing what he needed to do. Wow, Mr. Policeman suddenly has a potty mouth. If either of our mothers heard you, they'd be ramming a bar of soap between your teeth right about now. Ignoring her, Leo tapped her mask. I'm gonna need some prism. Thanks Seed Mother for giving Renetta a second wind, because Naira was exhausted. Adrenaline and prism was a fanina of a combo, but her body was nearing its limits. She'd suffered dozens of cuts and bruises tonight, and only sheer willpower was keeping her in motion. By comparison, Renetta fought like, well, an anima spawn. For someone who was barely 5'2" and maybe 110 pounds, she threw down with a monster nearly 3 times her mass, like a child playing keep-away with a parent. She was fast, and any hits she landed packed a punch that defied her small frame. Renetta had only rarely participated in their public training sessions, but now Naira wondered if the politicians snuck in private lessons with Marston. She wasn't an amazing fighter, but she was competent enough to make good use of her body's newfound abilities. Bradburn was wearing down, too. It was evident in the way he overcompensated, swinging so recklessly that he constantly risked his own balance in his attempts to drop Naira or Renetta. His eyes were glazed over, and several of his wounds were actively leaking blood. Even Renetta had her limits, it seemed. The rifle in her hands had actually bent from all the blunt force trauma she'd inflicted with it, so that it looked more like a crude crescent moon than an actual gun. No bullets would travel down a barrel that curved that badly. Taking 2 quick hops backwards, she stopped beside Naira to catch her breath. While Naira felt like she was in the final stretch of a cross-Cyphus marathon, Renetta acted like she'd just started the race 10 minutes ago. Yes, she was catching her breath, but it wasn't coming in gasps. She wasn't forcing steadiness to her breath the way Naira had to, by inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the teeth. Instead, she looked ready to run another few hours. Seed Mother, Naira felt old, and she and Renetta were still just barely into their 40s. Christum for your thoughts, love, Renetta asked, with only the slightest pause for breath. No amount of attempting to bash his brains in has seemed to do anything but give him more reason to shred my clothing in person. How do we finally fell this beast? Naira had been considering that very question. She'd come to one conclusion. While there's still prism in his system, he's just going to continue to heal himself until he drops dead from blood loss, or we drop dead from carelessness or exhaustion. Great. So how do we get his prism out of his system? Naira gave Renetta a knowing look, one that earned her a spectacular frown. Renetta held up a finger. No. I don't know any other way, Renetta. Renetta redirected her finger towards the growling mess that was Bradburn. I'm not putting my mouth anywhere on that thing. Then you better figure out a different method of leeching his prism real fast. Maybe it can work through fingers or claws. Naira shrugged. I've never been able to ask. Whenever I've been leeched, it's always through a bite. You seem to pick that method up right away. She thumbed over her shoulder towards where they'd left Moira. That's a low blow, love, Renetta hissed. Well, I don't care how you do it, but you better figure something out fast. Here he comes! They split off from each other as the mangled mass that was Bradburn flung itself at them. His busted knee dragged unsanitarily through the mud as he staggered through the spot where they'd both just been. Renetta needed a distraction, something to let her close the gap. Naira was good at being distracting. Running her fingers along the blood trailing down her arm, her fur stood on end. Running her fingers along the blood trailing down her arm, her fur stood on end with an electric crackle. Stepping into one of Bradburn's overzealous swings, his claws went past her, but his arm slammed into her shoulder. With a grunt, she grabbed the arm and sent a jolt of electrum through his body. As his spasming neared its end, she brought his arms together, slamming the empty handcuff down and locking his wrists to each other. Renetta leapt him from behind, wrapping one arm around his shoulders and throat, and digging her toe claws into his hips. He tried to buck her, but the restraints on his hands prevented him from grabbing her. Her other hand came down to his chest, and she dug in with her claws. They stayed that way for several long seconds, Bradburn twisting and stumbling in his attempts to knock her loose, and Renetta with her face scrunched into a focused snarl. There was no change to Bradburn's eyes. Please tell me this is doing something, love, Renetta called as Bradburn continued to flail. And nothing looks different, Naira called back. Instinct drove Bradburn onto his back, and he landed atop Renetta with such force that only her embedded claws kept her in place. Her breath was forced from her in a quick huff that left her coughing. Renetta? Yeah, I know, love, she said with a groan. One brief burst of particularly crass profanity later, and Renetta buried her teeth into Bradburn's shoulder. She held it for maybe 2 seconds before her eyes rolled, and she gagged in revulsion. Releasing him, she ran her tongue over her teeth, spitting vigorously. He's still glowing, Naira warned. I know, just give me a second. You try sticking a clump of muddy fur steeped in sweat and body odor into your mouth and see how long you can keep it in there. Bradburn rolled, putting more of his weight on Renetta. She swore again, taking what breath she could before going in for a second bite. The necrom in Leo's blood was only too happy to feel his touch. It sprang to attention faster than Tolson left his desk if you so much as mentioned a trip to the diner. Necrom's numbing warmth tickled the edges of his mind, hurt that he hadn't embraced it for weeks. It was his most loyal friend, the one that knew him best of all. The friend that was poisoning his life. His blood wasn't anywhere as potent as the necrom shells he'd used earlier. That was a good thing. He needed a precise touch now, not a shotgun blast. Closing his eyes, he brushed his thumb over the lodged bullet, smearing the back end with blood. He willed life and purpose into the necrom, and it responded with frustrating eagerness. Anything for Leo, its favorite person in the world. By the time the bullet had fully dissolved, Moira had stopped his bleeding. His face was still sore and swollen, but it didn't hurt to lift his arms anymore. He pushed the Necrom past the bullet, eating into dented metal, but not too far. It felt like holding onto the leash of a deerhound and letting it have a few bites from the neighbor's decorative berry bush without allowing it to devour the whole thing. If he broke the gun, that was it. Risking as much as he dared, Leo stopped the Necrom reaction. He could see some of the gun's internals now, and prayed he hadn't removed too much. His feet settled into position. With practiced motion, he raised the gun and sighted it on the biggest target in the stadium. Bradburn was currently rolling around in the mud, while a nearly feral-looking Renetta Dolahan clung to his back with part of his shoulder in her mouth. As if he needed anything else to make this shot more difficult. He expected more snarky quips from Moira, but the girl stayed respectfully silent. She'd done her part. Now it was time for him to do his. Steadying himself, Leo focused on his breathing. In, hold, out, out. Bradburn let out a roar, arms straining before he snapped the handcuff chain entirely. In, hold, out, out. Bradburn's hands reached over his shoulder, his claws digging into Renetta's back and tugging her forward. In, hold. Rolling onto his side, Bradburn flung Renetta away with a snarl, hands scrabbling in the mud to push himself upright. Fire! Leo squeezed the trigger, and Bradburn's gun went off. Bradburn's body recoiled as the gunshot faded. He'd only just gotten back on his feet, and all his weight shifted onto his good leg. He swayed there for a long moment, the way the top of a tree wobbles in a breeze. Then he turned around to face them as the glow disappeared from his eyes. He stared past Naira, eyes locked on Leo, who slowly lowered the gun. Bradburn's gulp was hard to spot in the rain, but it was there. "What?" he began, licking his lips and trembling. "What have you done?" Leo shook his head. "It's over, Bradburn." "It's over? It's over?" Bradburn spat. "No. I said this would end with you in a body bag, Parsons, and I meant it." As the prism in Bradburn's system vanished, his form lost some of its bulk. Yes, he was still a mountain of a man in his own right, but now it was hard to see any semblance of the powerful, controlled man he wanted the world to see. His face was a mess, his ears sagged, his tail was coated in so much mud it looked like a chocolate-dipped pretzel, and his bad leg dragged behind him like a temper-throwing child clinging to his waist. Even still, the monster took a long, limping step towards Chief Leo. His bad leg buckled under any sort of weight, his knee completely unrecognizable now, and he almost went crashing to the ground just from taking a step. He stayed upright, though the effort looked to cause him a great deal of pain. He took another step, and a soft voice filled the air. A wordless song spilled forth from Moira, who stood just beside Leo. It rose and fell, swelling and crashing like a river flowing downstream and picking up speed. Bradburn took another step, and her song crescendoed into a single word. Constrain. Naira watched in utter amazement as ice formed out of the mud around Bradburn's feet. It encased his good foot, tripping him mid-step. His fists crashed into the mud, and ice crept up to embrace his fingers. The ice spread as the song continued, creeping ever upwards past his wrists and ankle. Ice wrapped over his bad knee, spreading in either direction along his leg. The very ground beneath him layered over with ice, locking him in place. With a roar of frustration, Bradburn tore his hands free from the ground, though they remained encased in an ice that was spreading up his forearms. He tried to stand, but had no leverage to do so. By the time Moira's song ended, Bradburn was frozen in a position that was half seated, half kneeling, his entire lower half locked down. So much ice, and Naira hadn't even seen the girl produce an aquam crystal. Incredible. Bradburn let out a laugh, a bitter, defiant thing. You think you've won? You think you can stop me? that you can stop the changes that are coming? Cyphus is without leadership. Its people swept up in an epidemic that will ravage it from the inside out. We will be left broken and defenseless when the natives come knocking on our door. Stop me if you dare, but you're signing your own death warrants. Renetta cleared her throat. You claim Cyphus is without leadership when I'm standing right here. I'll admit, you did quite a thorough job of removing everyone else to install yourself, but I'm afraid you missed one, love. Glaring at her over his shoulder, Bradburn let out a snort. Your days are numbered, Dolahan. As are yours, Bradburn. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of dead in your wake. She trailed off with a mournful expression that shifted first to disgust, then resolution. I'll make sure you hang for this. Actually, Leo interjected, it's been several centuries since we've hung anyone in Cyphus. Melissa would want me to inform you that there was a provision in the articles condemning it as too barbaric, so there are other forms of capital punishment to consider for mass murderers. No judge will rule in your favor, Bradburn said with a dismissive laugh. If you want me dead, then you better use your own hands to do it. You won't, though. You lot are too pretty to get your hands dirty when you need to. You especially, Parsons. He fixed them with a wicked smile and continued. What a shame. I suggest you tuck tail and flee Cyphus while you have the chance. When I inevitably walk free, there won't be anywhere in Cyphus you or your loved ones can hide from me. Believe me, I'll make your lives so miserable Fanina will sound tame. He turned that smile on Naira. Just ask your husband what I'm willing to do to people in my care. Naira's fingers dug into her palms. Silatra bounced around just beneath the skin, and this time, Naira uncapped the bottle. Striding forward, she ran a dull claw along the scab that had just formed on her arm, drawing fresh blood. Smearing her palm with it, she clapped a hand on either side of Bradburn's head and let the electrum flow. Nobody stopped her. No one even voiced a complaint. Her audience was silent as 9 months of soul-rending fear and anguish burst from her. The unending fear that she'd never see the people she loved again. Never hold her husband or her son in her arms. The fear that had driven her to complicitly murder members of the 13, through the thinly veiled justifications that they deserved it, and she had to protect her family at any cost because no one else in Cyphus would. If ever there was a Sneppard in Cyphus that deserved to die by her hands, it was this monster in her electric grasp. His body tensed as her fingers dug into his skull, but his eyes never left hers. There was a disgusting smugness to them, proclaiming that Bradburn would still win whether she killed him or walked away. It defied her to choose. In the end, Naira didn't know what she chose. Her prism tank emptied before she could. He sagged there, parts of him still twitching as his body struggled again for breath that he eventually found. Bradburn would live to see official justice, after all. Part of her still wanted to fry him herself, to run so much electricity through him that his heart exploded. Truthfully, the bigger part of her was happy to finally be done killing. She was beyond exhausted. Silatra needed to finally be put to bed. Footsteps pounded towards them in the rain. Many, many footsteps. Men and women in officers' uniforms poured into the stadium, some of Renetta's surviving troops on their heels. They flooded around them, forming a sea of blue as they checked the numerous bodies strewn through the mud. Detective Melissa stepped out of the crowd, giving Naira a quick nod as she stepped over to Leo. Behind her, a nervous Elaine blinked against the rain, with Naira's alchemy satchel still clutched to his side. Exhausted, battered, and soggy as she was, Naira ran to him, and they embraced. Discarding her mask, she breathed in his scent, clinging to her husband like he would float away if she let up even a little. Never again would she let him go. Another officer stepped forward, huffing slightly and stretching his back. This was a man much closer in size to Bradburn, though not quite in build. someone she'd met back at the start of all of this. Officer Tolson Gray caught his breath and let out a hearty chuckle. I'm so glad I made it in time. Remember, Uncle Wilter? I told you, when the time came to arrest you, I'd be the first one there. With a grin, he produced a pair of handcuffs from his belt. They gleamed silver in a flash of lightning, and Bradburn's confident smirk finally wilted. One more. This is it. Chapter 71. Hand of Justice. Relief washed through Leo as thoroughly as the rain washed stray chunks of mud from his body. Tolson had just slapped Bradburn in a second pair of handcuffs, and Melissa was unharmed. It was over, and they'd lived through it. A smile spread across his face, and he gave her a quick nod. Unlike him, she still had all her alchemantic equipment, her mask still feeding her prism while she cradled the shotgun in a comfortable grip. Melissa? Leo? They stood across from each other, the seconds stretching out awkwardly while they both fidgeted in the rain. Eventually, Leo opened his arms, inviting a hug if she wanted one. Behind the mask, he caught a hint of a smile, and she took a step forward. Tolson materialized from the side, shoving past her and grabbing Leo in a massive bear hug that lifted him several inches off the ground. You're alive! He exclaimed with a series of happy noises. Leave it to Tolson to have the best timing. Yeah, buddy, I'm alive, Leo grunted, returning the hug with a few pats on the back. I could do with a little less squeezing, though. Bradburn shredded my waist, and it's still sore. Oops, sorry, Tolson said, giving Leo one final squeeze before stepping back and clamping an appreciative hand on Leo's shoulder. He glanced over at Melissa before nodding to Leo. Want a turn? Leo groaned. Way to absolutely kill the moment. Still, Melissa took it in stride, stepping in and giving them a big group hug. So, Tolson asked while he continued to squeeze them both, since all the dangerous stuff is over, may I shoot the awesome magic shotgun now? It was Melissa's turn to groan. Ask Leo for his. Taram's safer to start with. Tolson turned to Leo with comically wide and pleading eyes. Leo, my bestest friend in the whole wide world, you know how I feel about magic. Leo sighed. Yeah, I do. Truth is, I ditched the shotgun back inside the stadium because I ran out of shells and I was tired of carrying it. Tolson's eyes found a way to open wider. I would never abandon such a precious charge entrusted to me. Rolling his eyes, Leo said, We'll track it down once we're all out of this downpour. Since you don't want it, I could just adopt it. Melissa poked him in his well-rounded gut. I already told you, Tolson. Get your own. And how long is that going to take? Leo shook his head and let out a laugh, his brush with Necrom already forgotten. Moira's throat was killing her. She'd forgotten that it was possible to lose your voice, but she was sure feeling it now. An entire night of singing was murder on the throat. Still, when her mother walked over and wrapped her in a hug, Moira found the strength to croak out, Love you, Mom. They stood there for a long moment, her mother stroking her hair, and Moira enjoying her mother's comforting warmth. Then she remembered a certain friend lying face down in the mud and wanted to kick herself for her oversight. With some Curum still left in the tank, her work wasn't done just yet. Forgot something, she mumbled around a dry swallow. Taking her mother by the hand, Moira worked her way back towards where she'd left Tigra. The enormous tiger was still laying stomach first in the mud, head turned to one side to keep the mud from his nose. He smiled as they walked into his field of view. Is over? Moira nodded, settling onto her knees beside him. Yeah, big guy. It's over. Good. Is big relief. His eyes widened a bit as Renetta came to kneel beside her daughter. Apologies, Madame Dolahan. The sky felt threatened by my expert flying and swatted Tigra like bug. Would shake your hand for victory, but Tigra cannot feel fingers or toes. No need, Renetta said, patting him on a shoulder that was larger than her entire hand. You did well tonight, love, I'm sure. You don't even know the half of it, Moira said. Mom, he flew like some big fuzzy orange bird. I look forward to hearing all about it, Renetta said with a smile. It was her real one, not the fake one that got plastered on when hosting fellow rich people over for dinner parties. This was the kind of smile Moira only saw when her mother was genuinely happy. It was nice to see it again. Since you've got Prism in you and have done some singing with me before, I'm going to put you to work first. I'll help you find the tunes, and then you're going to sing for me so we can get Big Man up and going again. Her mother looked at her with a raised eyebrow, but the smile remained. I've raised a slave driver, it seems. She gave a nod. As you require, dearest. I'll follow your lead. I must say, your authority voice has improved significantly. Moira groaned. It's just because it hurts to use my voice at all right now. Regardless, Renetta said, reaching up to cup Moira's cheek in her hand. I've never been prouder to call you my daughter. Tazael laid in the mud, staring up into a cloud-filled sky. Rain bounced off the end of his muzzle, stinging his eyes. His head still pounded, but his mind was functioning again. He remembered being shot, remembered taking a kick to the face, and then fuzziness after that. How long had he been dazed? There were voices nearby, a whole crowd of them. Tazael sat bolt upright and immediately saw stars. Gritting his teeth, Tazael clutched at his head. More parts of his face and neck were angry with him than the rest of his body, and he'd taken one fanina of a beating tonight. The stadium's playing field was overflowing with snops. Great. As if his mood wasn't already in the dumps. People were checking bodies, calling out any time they found someone they thought they might be able to save. No one had made it out to him yet. That was for the best. He didn't need any dirty Snops' hands on him. He ran his fingers through his cropped hair, digging at his scalp to transform the pain to white noise. There was a center to the crowd, a gathering with far too many uniforms and far too tight a clump. And at the heart of that clump, Walter Bradburn, on his knees and still very much alive. The pounding in Tazael's head shifted into heat behind his eyes and in his ears. No! All this death tonight, and the monster still lived? Cyphus truly was a place where justice came to die. No one cared about justice here. Tazael rolled onto his hands and knees, too tired and sore to get to his feet any other way. His fingers slipped in the mud, brushing against something cold and metallic. He blinked, then reached out to wipe away the mud. No, justice still had a voice. His fingers wrapped around the metal grip, and he forced himself to his feet. Naira and Elaine held each other, muzzle pressed against muzzle. Naira knew she was crying, but she couldn't feel the tears for all the rain. 9 months without her family. Now that family was finally restored to her. The nightmare was over. They didn't have words for each other. They didn't need words. They needed each other. She caught the scent about the same time as Elaine did. They pivoted together, opening their hug to hold each other around the waist as they searched the crowd. Their son was out there. Both of them had smelled him. He was close. Tazael clutched the oversized gun so tightly, his fingers were starting to lose circulation. He kept it pointed straight down, letting the arm of his jacket hang down to conceal part of the weapon. Some of the Snops gave him passing glances as he wove around them, but they only ever looked at their eye level or at his face. Not one of them looked down at his hands. They were too busy worrying about survivors. Tazael didn't have a plan. He simply knew what he had to do, what he alone had the courage to do. In less than a minute, he stood before the monster. Bradburn's feet and legs were encased in ice, explaining why he was still kneeling in the mud. Squeakers must have done that. It seemed the Snops had contented themselves with pinning his arms behind him with handcuffs and were just waiting for the ice to melt. That left Bradburn's face at a rather convenient height. Squinting against the rain, Bradburn looked up at him as Tazael approached. Then he smiled.
Ah, the useless one. Your father and mother are already making up for lost time over there. I suggest you do the same while you still can.
Here knelt the smug bastard that had turned his family's life into a living fanina. Here knelt the seed of evil that had led to his brother's murder, taunting and threatening to the very end. Tazael said nothing. He simply raised Bradburn's own gun and pressed the barrel into the monster's forehead. Bradburn's eyes widened for only a second before the wicked grin returned. Gonna shoot me while we're surrounded by an army of Snops? I knew you were an idiot, Kit, but I didn't think you'd gone native. Go ahead, then. You don't have the... Tazael pulled the trigger, and the gun's recoil nearly took off his wrist. Leo forced his way through the crowd as 2 more high-caliber gunshots echoed out. At least a dozen officers had all drawn their weapons and were yelling at someone to stand down. "Cease fire!" Leo barked out, pushing up to the front of the pack. Over a dozen guns were trained on a lanky Nulf in a green and white Letterman jacket. Bradburn's Steris 55 was gripped in both of Tazael's hands, pointed straight down at the unmoving body of its former owner. Bradburn had 3 new holes in his head, and Tazael's pants and jacket were spattered with fresh blood and viscera. "Seed mother's sake!" Leo barked out again, stepping in front of several officers' line of fire. "Everybody lower your weapons. There's been enough shooting and death tonight for a lifetime. No one else needs to be shot." "That's not true," Tazael said in a numb, distant voice behind him. "There's still one more murderer that needs to face justice." Leo didn't have to turn around to know the gun was pointed at him. He turned around anyway, and sure enough, the barrel was inches from his nose. "Don't!" Naira called out, desperately forcing her way through the clump of anxious officers. It was happening again. She was about to lose another son to the same tragedy. Anima wasn't content with taking just one son. "Seed mother, don't make me go through that again." Tazael's gaze was locked on Leo as he held the chief at gunpoint. "Tazael, put the gun down," Naira said, choking down her own emotions to present Tazael with the illusion of calm. Tazael didn't look at her. Lightning flashed overhead, and Salatra's rage shone in his eyes, even without any prism. "Tazael, please." Her son gulped, but his eyes refused to leave Leo's. "This murderer killed Ren." "I know," she said, fighting to give her voice more strength than a whisper. "He killed Ren, Mom!" Naira swallowed painfully. "I know, Tuss. Believe me, I know." The gun was shaking now. She couldn't see Leo's face from this angle, but he wasn't moving. Please don't let him think he still deserves this, she thought. "He has to answer for it," Tazael said, resteadying his aim. "Ren deserves justice." Naira took a cautious step forward. "Chief Leo already has answered for it." "What? With a self-serving funeral and a slap on the wrist? He shot Ren and was back on the streets within a month. They didn't even take his gun." Naira took another step. Panic was making her breathing painful, but she couldn't help it. "It's not true, Taz." "How would you know? After Ren died, you shut your ears to the world for a year. You boxed up Ren's stuff, put it all down in the basement, so you didn't have to see it or smell him anymore. When the charges disappeared, you gave up on justice for Ren. I won't." "Taz, please. It's your mother who loves you. I'm begging you, don't do this. This man isn't who you think he is." "He's a snop and a murderer." "And he's sorry." "Sorry?" Tazael licked his lips,
finally glancing over at his mother. Then he looked back at Leo, aiming the gun at the chief's forehead. Is sorry going to bring Ren back? No, Naira admitted softly. But if you pull that trigger, I lose a friend, and I lose my last son. Tazel grimaced, eyes red and leaking tears. His voice broke. You're friends with the man who murdered your son? My brother? Naira took another slow step forward. He's not what you think. I promise you, Leo's paid his penance for what he did to Ren. Her nose wrinkled, but not unpleasantly. In fact, her own breathing started to calm. She smelled Tarum? The sea of officers around them was too tall to see through, but somewhere among them, she knew a certain small sneppard was doing her part to defuse the situation. Bless that girl. Dazale's grip tightened on the gun, and Naira stopped. Folding her hands, she brought them to her chest. Please. I've been through Fanina already to get you back. I can't lose you again. Tazale licked his lips again, rain bouncing off his nose. I was never the favorite. Taz! Naira barked, surprising even herself with the force it carried. I love you both! Her voice softened, mere inches from breaking. I love my whole family more than anything this bulb has to offer. You know I don't deal in favorites. Now stop being selfish, put the gun down, and come home. Raindrops bounced off the cold arbiter of death, running down the gun and disappearing into Dazale's sleeves. The gun shook in his hands, and his eyes darted between his mother and Leo. It was a war between his love for his brother and his love for his mother. If that was the choice he was hung up on, then it was time to rig the question. You and I both know that the last thing Ren would want is people dying because of him. If you shoot Leo, you're no son of mine, and you're the last kind of brother that Ren would want. Tears streamed down Tazale's cheeks. His whiskers trembled, and his blinking intensified. The fire was fading in his eyes. Anger was being flushed away by tired sorrow. Once more he glanced at his mother, and she knew in that moment that she had him. Come home to me, please. After one prolonged, final look of anguish, Tazale slowly lowered the gun. End of part 7. Whew. Whew. The hands are shaking. The eyes are watering. I can't feel my fingers. I'm gonna have to clear my nose in a minute. Let me see. Yep. And despite that being the quote unquote, the quote unquote end, there's still 43 pages left in the book. Because I'm insane. Whew. So yeah, we'll end up diving into the epilogues next time. Because I kind of want to go through all of them at once so that we can roll through them and have it be, continuous. Woo! Oh, that ending. Yeah. Excuse me for a moment. Every time I come to that final exchange, when I'm reading it on my own, I always tear up. Ugh. I love these characters so much. How many of you expected it to end that way? How many of you thought that Bradburn was gonna get away with, going to prison for a long time, or before getting dealt with, or they never expect the Tazael. I do talk about Tigra in the epilogues, so you'll be able to find out next week. No spoilers. Ugh. Hand of Justice. Yup. All those times Tazael said so confidently that he was going to be sure to end Bradburn. He had to be the one to do it. And yeah, their little family survived. Wild as that is. We're in as much danger as they were in. Seriously, my hands are still shaking. Well, we'll get to that in the epilogues. there was there was a lot of murder that happened over the course of the story. It's a bit late for a rewrite. There is a hole in the bulb, literally publicly endangering millions of people. But I'm sure that's probably fine. In fact, I think the first two epilogues deal with it. Oof. Well, was it worth the ride, guys? As long as it's taken to get to this point, as long and arduous of a journey as it was. Ame? Ame who made the weapons? Well, part of the problem is that the hole that got punched in the bulb is literally thousands of feet in the air at the apex of a dome. So just getting up to it is difficult. And Ame happens to be in a wheelchair because she can't use her legs. So build a new bulb. That would be an intense amount of work. I basically pictured a city about half the size of Denver for Siphus, and then magically enclosed that in a giant glass dome. So it's a really, 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 really big dome. But well, sorry this one's a little shorter than normal, but this will give us quite a bit of ending content next time. The epilogues are very much where I indulge in the characters. With Sanderson stuff, there's a buddy of mine who actually, my friend who got me into Sanderson initially, um, likes to talk about how one of his favorite things about Sanderson is that Sanderson tends to have a habit of investing in his characters and making you feel fruit of that investment, to where he rewards you for investing your own feelings, emotions, etc. into the characters, for caring about them. He turns around and rewards you and lets them shine. I always loved that idea, and so I try to do it with Alchemancer as well, and all my writing. Of, if you've trusted me to take you on this journey this far with these characters, I want to reward you for it. So expect a lot of warm fuzzies to come to make the journey all worth it. Is there a wedding? Well, I don't want to spoil anything, because again, I need you to come back next week to listen to stuff. If I tell you all the cool stuff that happens in the epilogues, you won't want to come back. You'll heard it all and you won't need to know. Well, I've about run out of steam, so I'm gonna I appreciate the commitment to True, I mean, I guess the first draft of Alchemancer was done 2 years ago? 2.5 years ago? I think it might have been 2.5 years since I finished the first draft. But then it took another 2 years to edit it and actually get it to the point where I was fully satisfied with it and ready to share it. Moira. Oh no. Guys, I don't know how to explain this. They hate each other's guts. There is zero respect in that relationship whatsoever. They could not be polar opposites. More polar? They could not be more polar opposites. There we go. Sometimes opposites attract. And there's an example of that in this very book. But it ain't to Zale and Moira. Naira's married. And Renetta's a grieving widow who actually kind of likes being a widow. She's in her girl boss era of life. I mean, if nothing happened between them when there was the whole duct tape to a chair in the basement with Naira in just a t-shirt on her washing machine eating cereal like it was a casual Tuesday morning, probably not, but still one of my favorite scenes of the book, just because it's such a glimpse into both of their characters, and it goes such a long way into so thoroughly upsetting Renetta's world that that I think it enables her to actually enjoy becoming Naira's friend eventually. Who is this crazy Nulf?
She's unhinged. She's wild. She named her washing machine. She's dirt poor. This is absurd. Side eye. Ugh. Well, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed the story, enjoyed the characters. I look forward to indulging with you in all the warm, gooey, happy feelings next time as we dive into the epilogues and wrap up the story. I wasn't sure if I would ever come back to this world, so I wanted to make sure that however I ended Alchemancer, that I did it in such a way that I would feel closure. Like total closure for the story. So I do a very thorough job in the epilogues of wrapping up everything I could think to wrap up. On the again, on the off chance that I never came back and revisited it. Now that I've had a couple of years, I have had an idea for something else I could do in this world, and I may end up doing that. Spoilers, if I do, it involves Naomi, because man, I love that girl. I have thought about bringing the waitress into that particular story as well. Naomi and Noelle could be a fun combination. Get the ice-focused Alchemancer and the accountant in training. A paralegal? I can't remember what she's studying. I think she's an accountant. I think. It's not technically defined in the book. Like, it's not explicitly stated what Noelle is going for with her degree. But it's implied that she's very good at poring over legal documentation, and especially numbers. To look for discrepancies and things like that. But yeah, I think I'd like to explore the world a little bit from that side of things. This will also mean very little to most of you, but around the time I had this idea, I saw the movie The Accountant 2 in theaters, this was like 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago, whatever it was. It probably could have been longer than that. And that movie is what kind of inspired me for a potential storyline for something with Naomi. I intend for that to be even more of a thriller than this book was. Because this one was very much a slow burn. As it was a slow burn mystery drama. I mean, there's a lot of just getting to know the characters and seeing them dealing with all of this hot garbage in life. That one is definitely intended to be more thriller, more action focused, more fast paced. Because I think Naomi would be really, really, really fun in that kind of role. But I say all this, all of that is just notes in my big story ideas Word doc right now. I have not done anything more for that than a couple pages. So I'll have to get on that. But I have like 2 other stories in the pipeline currently that aren't Alchemancer related. I've got a sci-fi piece that's supposed to be part of a bigger series, and then I actually got a fantasy piece that I'm working on, believe it or not, which is wild. As much as I assumed that I was forever burnt out on fantasy, here I come crawling back to it. So I'm going to be working on both of those first, but anyway, I'm rambling. Sorry, guys. But thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for enjoying my book. And I am very much looking forward to next Tuesday when we wrap it up. It'll be the season finale of season 1 of Tuesday Tales with Todd, at which point I will need to write another book so that we can actually come back to have more Tuesday Tales with Todd as a season 2 at some point. I can't say when that will be, because I need to have a book first. But hopefully I won't make you guys wait too long. So, all that being said, thank you all for coming. I love you guys. And I will see you next Tuesday. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.